Peace of Christ, dear friends, and welcome to the iBelong Youth Conference. I'm sure you're having a great time, and these last few days have been just truly life-changing for every single one of us. You know, I'm not an avid follower of the Olympics, but you say the name Michael Phelps and you got my attention. And his story, my dear friends, doesn't just inspire sports lovers. You know, it inspires even people like me, sports introverts. I know his story has spoken to so many seasons of my life. He's a proud owner of 82 medals, 65 of them gold, making him the highest decorated athlete of all times. And if you remember the London 2012 Olympics, he kind of retired as all men who achieve their target of excellence do. And then he kind of retired and fell off from the face of the earth, so to say. But then he resurfaced. But the way in which he resurfaced wasn't quite what we had in mind. In 2014, in September, Michael Phelps was arrested because he was driving 84 miles an hour and he was tested for alcohol in his blood. That night, the world-renowned Olympian was arrested and taken to jail. After the jail, he was released and he was sent back home, where he kind of isolated from every single person. He isolated for a couple of days while the paparazzi gathered around his house, waiting, wondering what's going to happen to this great Michael Phelps. And during this time of isolation, friends, many secrets begin to come out. In one of the interviews, his coach said, this Michael, he's not quite like what he was before. He's very irritable, he comes, he misses practices, he comes very angry, he has a volatile temper, nobody wants to be around him, and nobody can correct him because he's so famous. But it was during this dark time, my dear friends, that his closest friends came for him. And they called him out into truth, and they called him out of the darkness, and they looked him in the eye, and they reminded him that he wasn't pursuing the excellence that he was born for. And they were not afraid. They were not afraid of his anger. They were not afraid of how famous he was, and they weren't there to sugarcoat words, because the greatest desire of their hearts was to see their friend set free. It was because of these friendships, these relationships, that this great Olympian went into rehab. And for 45 days into rehab, my dear friends, he came face to face with the realities of his life. There were many things in his life that he was running away from. One of them being the broken relationship that he had with his father for many, many years. After rehab, in one of the interviews, he said what should become the pivot of all human relationships. He said, the Michael that you see now, he's not the old person. You see a brand new person. And these stories, friends, they move us, they stir our hearts, because deep at the recesses of our being, at our hearts, we desire these relationships. We long for these human connections, and that is why we are created. We are created for communion. We are created for connection. And that is what Catechism reminds us when it tells us what it means to be fully human. It means to live in authentic communion with God, an authentic communion with one another. That is why God places these relationships in our lives. That is why God gives us these friendships, so that through them we can truly emerge out into this life of excellence, this life of virtue for which we are made. C.S. Lewis tells us true friendships make life worth living. And who among us cannot testify with this truth? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when something amazing happens to you? Well, besides posting on Instagram, of course. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you've had an awful day at work, an awful day at school? You want to tell someone. You'll cry, but you want to tell someone. And you're not afraid of how cringy your face looks through those tears and the running nose. You're not afraid because you're in the company of your friends. And I love what C.S. Lewis says in his book, The Four Loves. He says the typical expression of any friendship opens like this: "What? You two? I thought I was the only one." And we can all relate to this. Maybe it was your first day at school or your first day in high school, and you're thinking, man, am I the only one here? But then someone comes along and they have the same backpack as you, or the same jersey, or the same shoes as you, and you go like, oh my gosh, like me too. Back in our days, we had something called the same pinch. So if someone wore something similar, we'd go and pinch them. and we'd pinch them hard, and it would hurt. It would hurt, but there was joy because we were in the company of our friends. In today's culture, my dear friends, it is becoming increasingly challenging to foster and sustain authentic relationships. So much of our lives revolve around social media. I mean, today you add someone on Facebook or you follow them on Instagram and you qualify as a friend. But all they have is access to your page and your posts, and you have access to theirs. They don't have access to your heart, and they don't have access to the deepest parts of your story. You know, the word friend in Hebrew is a very close word that relates to secrets, because that is what a friend is. A friend is someone that we can share the deepest parts of our life with. That is where we get the word confidant from, confide, with trust. With trust. We trust someone, not with information. We trust them with our life. That is why we feel the deepest pain of life when the trust is violated. And today, my dear friends, we live in a culture where we have so much of access to information, but we also live in a very high-risk culture where that information can be easily breached. It takes 1 second to send a private message to someone. It takes 1 second to screenshot something that is confidential, but it takes a lifetime. It takes a lifetime to undo that damage and to repair those strained relationships. I know of this young girl I remember, who went into deep depression. She even missed out a long part of her school, and she was placed under psychiatric treatment because there's some videos of herself that she sent to a friend, who then sent it to others, and who sent it to others, and before you knew it, it became viral in our community. And that hurts. That hurts. Jim Rohn, he's a life coach, an amazing life coach. And something that he says is very interesting about friendships. He says, show me the 5 people you hang out most with, and I'll tell you where you'll end up in life. Because we don't just choose people. We adopt their lifestyles. We adopt their perceptions. We ultimately, my dear friends, we adopt their worldviews. We ultimately become who we choose. That is why through life's painful experiences, you'll notice that as you grow older, the circle of your friends becomes smaller and smaller. I mean, we start with 60, but then as you grow older, because of the circumstances and the situations that you'll learn from, the circle of friends becomes small and it becomes restrictive. And you see that even in the life of Jesus. I mean, he's this popular person. He knows such a lot of people, such a lot of people know him. And then he has his 72 that he sends, forth in ministry, 2 by 2. And then he's got these other guys in ministry. And then he got his 12, who are his squad. But he had 3 best friends that he shared the deepest part of his heart with. Many hundreds of years ago, many hundreds of years before Christ, actually, a Greek philosopher by the name of Aristotle, whom we know very well, studied about friendships. And what he did is he divided friendships into 3 different categories. And so what I'd like us to do right now, my dear friends, is to evaluate these friendships based on these 3 different categories. Maybe we can take a step back a little bit to see, where do my friendships really fit in? So the first type of friendship that Aristotle talked about is called the friendship of utility. This friendship is based on a benefit that you get from someone. So for example, someone that helps you with your homework. Maybe you meet every other afternoon for math or calculus or some kind of help that you need. In business, we exchange goods. In Starbucks, we give them money, they give us liquid happiness. I'm just kidding. But these relationships are very superficial. Once the projects are done, once the utility is finished, the friendship dissolves. There's nothing deeper. The second kind of friendship that Aristotle talked about is the friendship of pleasure. So these friendships are based on common interests and common pleasures. So it's a group of people coming together to enjoy mutual enjoyment of activities. Maybe it's sports, it's music, it's movies, it's travel. So it's like like-minded people coming together. Many school friendships are like that. When we are younger, these pleasures are the simple things in life. But as we grow older, these pleasures become very complicated, and sometimes, my dear friends, they lead us to dangerous grounds. Pleasures are good starting points, and they can actually foster lifelong relationships. But if we are not careful, these pleasures can lead us off course. And so today, as you look at your friendships and you look at your friends, ask yourself, do these friends lead me to that life of virtue? Do they lead me to that life of excellence for which I am called for? Because if these friendships are all about just, drinking parties and hooking up with guys and using cuss words and all of the negativity and gossip, nothing more than that, nothing more than cheap thrills of life, then maybe it's time that you have to relook at your friendship. The third type of friendship that Aristotle talked about is the friendship of excellence. We also call them authentic friendships. These are the friendships for which we are made. And these are the guys, my dear friends, that we get to do life with. They are the guys who are real with us, and they are whom we can be very, very real with. These are people like in Michael Phelps' story, the people who call us out into truth, and they lead us to that path. They lead us to that path of excellence. I know in my own life, as a preacher, as a youth mentor, it's very easy for me to know a lot of people. But it's through the life's difficult roads, it's through the trials and difficulties of life that I've discovered who my true friends really are. Ecclesiastes 6 verse 5 is one of my favorite quotes. It says, a faithful friend is a sure shelter, and whoever finds one finds a rare treasure. And it's so true, because in today's generation where everything is I, me, myself, it's so difficult to find these rare friendships. And when you find them, it's so rare. And I know in my own life, I stayed with toxic relationships for so long. There were things that I did that deep within my heart I didn't want to do, but I did them because I just wanted to fit in. And so I know the worth and the value of these rare treasures in my life today. They're people who know me, they have seen me at my worst, they have my secrets, and I have their trust. In their company, my dear friends, I don't have to pretend to be anyone I'm not. And I don't have to be pressurized to do anything that I don't believe in. These are guys that will call me out into truth. They will recognize when I waver, they will see inconsistencies in my life, and they will lovingly confront me for the good of my own soul. I often say there are many things in life that bring us happiness, but there's very, very few things in life, very few. One of them is authentic friendships that truly bring us Christian joy. And speaking about joy, one of my favorite paintings in the world is a painting of Mary and Elizabeth. The original watercolor painting is by an artist called Corby Eisbacher. And one word to describe this painting is joy. You just look at this painting, and I see these two friends, and I see how they are in each other's company. So much of joy in their presence. They're so free, so alive in each other's company. And don't we, my dear friends, don't we at the core of our hearts, don't we long for these kind of friendships? And as you know, this painting is taken from that beautiful Annunciation story that we find in Luke's Gospel. We find that in chapter 1, verses 39 to 45, where the angel has come to Mary, and she's told her that the Savior of the world is going to be born in her. And one of the things that always amazes me of young Mary's yes is that her yes is not some passive yes. It's not some, resigned acceptance to say, well, let's give it a try and see what happens, or I guess I have no choice. No, her yes is a joyful yes. Her yes is joyful because it stems from her commitment to go beyond herself for the good of another, even at great cost. This is where I say she aces above the Kylie Jenners of our generation. She is a true influencer of our generation. The willingness to go beyond oneself for the good of another. And my dear friends, isn't this love? Isn't this love? St. Thomas Aquinas, he gives us a definition of love, and he completely nails it. He says, love is to will the good of another. Love is to will the good of another. And in today's generation, in our culture, we don't fall short to express love, don't we? Even on Instagram, sometimes it's very amusing when people reply to comments on a post. they always have to have at least one heart emoji, because that is how, we want to express, we want to show love, in our generation like this. But Mary's life challenges us. Her life challenges us. What does it mean to truly love someone? First and foremost, my dear friends, it means that love has to be based on the foundation of truth. Mary has received this truth, but this truth is not some intellectual data. Mary has a relationship with this truth. To Mary, truth is a person whom she loves and who loves her very, very much. It is out of this relationship, my dear friends, that comes forth her security. It is out of this relationship that comes forth her confidence. It is because of this relationship that she's willing to go beyond herself for the good of another. To love is to will the good of the other. Love does not say, "What can I get out of this? What can you give me?" True love says, "What can I give you?" And that is what we see in the life of Mary. She gets out of her comfort zone and she heads off to see Elizabeth. And if you know anything about the Middle East, you know how rough the terrain can be. And this is 100 miles away from where she is. And she's 3 months pregnant, by the way. Forgetting about self, she goes ahead thinking about her friend. One of my close friends lives overseas, and there was a time when both of us were part of the same ministry, and we were part of similar projects. And there was this one time when we were part of the same assignment, but a couple of weeks into this assignment, I noticed something different about her. So I noticed that she was keeping a distance. I noticed that she was not replying in the way that she normally does. So anyway, cut a long story short, one thing led to another. And one day she just confronted me and she just vented out, but she lashed out in anger. And in the bargain, what she did, my dear friends, is that she just brought forth some really hurting words before me. But those words didn't hurt as much as the lies that she had believed about me from someone else. Our relationship was strained for some time and we kept a distance. But then one day I needed some project, some information on some project from church, and so she had that information, and so I called her. And when I called her, when she heard my voice, she just began to weep. And she wept and she wept. And then she told me about this long-standing trial in her life that I didn't know even when I was friends with her. And we kept talking, and she also at the time told me about the lies. Finally, the lies that were exposed, and she found out what the truth was. And one thing that was evident in that phone conversation, one thing that was evident in that relationship, my dear friends, was instant forgiveness. Because there was genuine love, and love never changes. That incident was 12 years ago, I think more than 12 years ago. In fact, that incident brought us together. And today, across cities and across countries and across distance, we remain very, very close. Very, very close. And that is what true love does in friendship. Love never changes. Love does not change with seasons or time or distance or geography. Love does not even change in adversity. In fact, love is strengthened through adversity. And that is what we see, my dear friends, in the life of Mary and Elizabeth. We see that when God is the center of our friendships, we always win. Because truth, my dear friends, always wins. And where there is truth, there is love. And we see that in these women. We see them, one is a teenager and she's pregnant. And she could be stoned to death in a culture, in Jewish culture, it was like that. The other is, she's probably 80 years old and she's pregnant and she could be an embarrassment in that culture. And yet they hang on to something that is solid. They hang on to the anchor in life's storm. Their friendship, my dear friends, is rooted on the truth of God's word. It is based on the foundation of truth, which is God's word. It is out of that foundation that they derive their strength. It is out of that foundation that comes forth the joy, even in the midst of deep and grave adversity of life. Bishop Barron tells us when God draws near to us, the luminous we become, the more radiant we become. That is what the psalmist says in Psalms 34 verse 5. He says, look to the Lord and be radiant with joy. Today, my dear friends, I don't know where you're at. I don't know if instead of seeing joy, you see sadness. Instead of seeing luminosity in life, you see darkness. I don't know if you're compromising in your friendships or you're remaining under the pressure of toxic relationships. I don't know if you are in abusive relationships, if you're allowing yourself to be abused or you're abusing others. I don't know if you're living with hurt and the pain of brokenness in friendships or unforgiveness and bitterness, whether you're living through the pain of betrayal. One thing that I have discovered in my own life is that the reason we hurt others and the reason we allow ourselves to be hurt is because deep within us, my dear friends, we are wounded ourselves. I have some painful stories of friendships that I can share at another time. But I know today, my dear friends, what God is doing in my life, what Jesus is doing in my life, even today as He heals my broken heart, even as He is bringing healing into my heart, what I see today is that every single person that has walked into my life, what God is doing, my dear friends, that He's using these people as teaching tools for me. That He's using these things to teach me about life and to teach me how to truly love. I say there are no enemies in life, only vessels that God uses to let His work shine, His redemptive work shine, to show the world what love really looks like. Like I said, Jesus had 3 best friends whom He promised to love till the end. And these guys also promised to love Him till the end. Some of them were so patriotic that they professed that love in public, and yet at the most crucial moments of His life, crucial moments when He needed them the most, at the cross, they deserted Him. In fact, the night before the cross, at the Garden of Gethsemane, when His soul is in anguish, when He's sweating drops of blood, all He needed at that time, my dear friends, is to be in the company of those He loved, just to receive perhaps one word of comfort. But they were asleep. They were asleep. He had said to them in John 15, verse 15, I don't call you servants, because a servant doesn't know where the master is. I call you friends. And all that I've heard from the Father, I have made known to you. He was saying to them, guys, I have no secrets. You have full access here to my heart. My heart is vulnerable before you. And you get to come in. You have the freedom to come in, guys. And you have the freedom to either come in and uphold my heart, or you have the freedom to break my heart. True love does not say, what can I get out of this friendship? What can you give me? True love says, what can I give you? And Jesus on the cross, my dear friends, says to us, I give you everything. I give you everything. Jesus on the cross, His hands, His feet are nailed, His body is broken beyond recognition. He can take nothing from us. He can take nothing from us. He can only give. And here at the cross, my dear friends, all the loves of the world fade. All the friendships of the world are redefined. At the cross, my dear friends, we are invited to see what love looks like. And we are invited to see what authentic love looks like. No one has greater love than this, Jesus said, than to give His life, to lay down His life for His friends. And that is what we see on the cross. Jesus pouring His life out for His friends, showing us what it means to truly love, showing us what friendship is like. If there's ever a moment in your life where you've been betrayed, if there's ever a moment in your life where you felt isolated and abandoned, you felt like nobody loves you, you've looked at everything on social media and said, how come they have all of these friends and I have none? If there's ever a moment in your life where you felt the exclusion of life, you've been excluded, there is a voice that cries first on the cross. That voice, my dear friends, cries for you. Before we can voice our cries to God, there's a voice that cries first, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? And so no matter where we are, my dear friends, in life, there is a voice that says to you and to me too, me too. I've been there. I know what it feels like to have your heart broken. And this voice, my dear friends, today invites us to belong, as the theme of the conference goes. He invites us to come to that friendship that will never let us down. And it is through this friendship, and only through this friendship, my dear friends, only through this authentic, genuine friendship, that we can truly cultivate true and meaningful relationships in life. Today, this friend, this faithful friend who will never leave us, never forsake us, never let us down, he invites you to come to him today. Of all the titles of Jesus, the one that I love the most is Jesus, friend of sinners. This Jesus, my dear friends, whom we can dare to call a friend, and to whom we can truly and genuinely belong. God bless.